I take your points on what you did right and what you did wrong. But, any response, this is sort of the booby trap of American politics. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined now by Susan Crabtree. She is the national political correspondent for RCP. And Susan, you have a piece out this morning on the front page of RCP with the headline, Slotkin, America Needs Responsible, Not Reckless Change. It's a great write-up of the Democratic response to Donald Trump's speech from last night. So here's a little bit of freshman Senator Elissa Slotkin from last night, giving the Democratic response.
President Trump loves to say peace through strength. That's actually a line he stole from Ronald Reagan. But let me tell you, after the spectacle that just took place in the Oval Office last week, Reagan must be rolling in his grave. We all want an end to the war in Ukraine, but Reagan understood that true strength required America to combine our military and economic might with moral clarity. And that scene in the Oval Office wasn't just a bad episode of reality TV. It summed up Trump's whole approach to the world.
So pretty interesting, a Democrat invoking Ronald Reagan in her response. What did you make of that, and what did you make of the speech?
Well, I thought it was extremely effective. She is sort of everything that the Democrats have been, just wringing their hands over. The response is sort of centrist, and it was sort of the opposite of what we saw last year playing out in the election. She has eschewed identity politics. She has taken the Democratic Party to task after the election for engaging in that and not talking about kitchen table issues, hitting with it. What keeps Americans up at night is really what's going on with their bank account and inflation. I thought it was the right response at the right time, especially after what we saw with this sort of disruptive display, the bingo or auction cards, being held in the air by the Democrats that just looked a little bit, amateurish and not as effective as Donald Trump commanding the stage. But she had a very commanding presence afterwards, I thought.
Yeah. So she's an interesting person. She's 48 years old. She's a former CIA analyst. She served in Iraq, narrowly won her seat that was being vacated by Debbie Stabenow. She said in her speech that her mom was a lifelong Democrat. Her dad was a loyal Republican. So, the question that has come up a couple times today, is this really the future of the Democratic Party? Or some people have already criticized her for just what you pointed out, that she was sort of moderate, centrist, bipartisan.
Well, if you asked David Axelrod afterwards, he was saying that, Al Green, who was the congressman that was with the cane that got escorted out, was yelling at Donald Trump. He said his performance was despicable and that the Democratic Party should go in the way of Elissa Slotkin. Certainly, Michigan is a swing state, so she's representing her state. She won. She's a CIA analyst who then went to work for both the Bush administration and the Obama administration. And that's interesting to me because I used to cover Representative Mike Rogers, who was a former FBI agent and an Intelligence Committee chairman. I covered him when he was chairman, and he was a very affable, very centrist type of guy as well, a very effective chairman of the Intelligence Committee. So it's not any minor thing that she won that election by.
Right. I was going to say, so this was a big race, Mike Rogers versus Elise Stefanik. It got a lot of attention in Michigan, which, of course, Trump carried the state, and she won tiny victory, right? Like something like 19,000 votes or 0.03% or something. So, yeah, you're right. To beat Mike Rogers is no small feat.
Right. And so she's trying to say that this is how we win elections. This is how we win the majority back. We are not, we need to win these swing districts in these swing states, and we're not going to do so by, identity politics and the AOC sort of movement and talking about, transgender issues. And that's an 80-20 issue, with most Americans supporting what the president is doing by getting rid of, saying that there's two genders and trying to play down transgender politics and men and women's sports. So, I think that Slotkin is onto something. What I think she didn't address well was how the Democrats are going to do this. She talked about that she was a Cold War baby. I'm a Cold War baby as well. I grew up in that era, but it's a different time. We have lived through the longest war in our nation's history, and a very deadly two wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now we're seeing in Ukraine this deadly carnage play out that Donald Trump is trying to stop. So I think the tide has turned. We're not in a Cold War anymore, thanks to Ronald Reagan and our policies of defense buildup. But now we're looking inward, and the country wants reform within our country. And I think she didn't address that very well. And I also didn't think she talked about the tariffs, the damaging tariffs that she said Donald Trump is engaging in, that could hurt inflation, but she didn't say what's the Democrats' alternative. So I thought she was strong, representing the middle ground and a good turn of the page for Democrats. I didn't think she, provided the solutions that the alternatives to what Donald Trump is pushing on the agenda.
Yeah, you're listening to Real Clear Politics. On Sirius XM, I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Susan Crabtree. The Democratic response, and I take your points on what you did right and what you did wrong. But, any response, this is sort of the booby trap of American politics. And it's always some up and coming politician. This is going to be their chance to make it. And, Senator Katie Britt, Alabama kind of flamed out last year. Everyone remembers Marco Rubio with his bottle of water that he kept drinking. So you can get in trouble in any number of ways. It did seem to me that the staging was good, that she was calm. There were no gimmicks. So just in terms of a piece of television, I thought it was one of the most effective ones I've seen. But not everyone is such a fan. This is Tom Nichols writing in The Atlantic. He said, Slotkin's address suffered from the same half-heartedness that has seized the Democrats since last November. Her response and the behavior of the Democrats in general showed that they still fear becoming a full-throated opposition party because they believe that they will alienate voters who will somehow be offended at them for taking a stand against Trump's scheme. So just a couple minutes left here, but raises the question which I've sort of asked before, but, that sort of hair on fire attitude that you sort of saw in the chamber, that's what a lot of Democrats are calling for. And I'm wondering if, on reflection, people will look at this and say, it was great, it was a nice speech, but she's not where we want to be. We need to be full-throated. We need to be a real, lively opposition to what I think Nichols called it the hallucinatory politics that we're engaged in right now.
Well, there's appealing to the base, and then there's winning elections. And certainly after the losses from last November, the party needs to reevaluate. And certainly Axelrod and others are promoting the Slotkins of the world, and her more centrist, calm, steady, reasonable versus reckless, responsible kind of messaging. Now, of course, when you talk about USAID and other DOGE cuts, the Democrats are going to be hair on fire opposing that, and many of them think that's an effective message and strategy. And today we see the Supreme Court actually siding against the Donald Trump in terms of the $2 billion freeze on foreign assistance. So, those voices are going to be out there. I think all the party needs to be represented in terms of a strategy standpoint. But in terms of winning swing states and winning elections, in terms of general elections for presidential, for the president and for control of Congress, I think the Democrats would be wise to listen to the Slotkin messaging. They do need to come up with alternative solutions, however, and I think that's where she was lacking.